To the authorities of the United Nations, the representatives of the various countries that make it up, and to all the citizens of the world watching us, good afternoon. For those who don't know, I'm not a politician. I'm an economist, a libertarian liberal economist who never had the ambition to engage in politics and who was honored with the role of President of the Republic of Argentina in the face of more than a century of collectivist policies that destroyed our country. This is my first speech before the United Nations General Assembly. And I want to take this opportunity to humbly alert the nations of the world about the path they have been on for decades and the danger of this organization failing to fulfill its original mission. I'm not here to tell the world what it should do. I'm here to tell the world, on one hand, what will happen if the United Nations continues to promote the collectivist policies it has been advocating under the mandate of the 2030 Agenda. And on the other hand, what values the new Argentina stands for. I do want to start by giving credit where credit is due. The United Nations organization was born out of the horror of the most brutal war in global history, with the main goal of ensuring it never happens again. To that end, the organization engraved its fundamental principles in stone in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There, a basic agreement was laid out around one maxim: that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Under the stewardship of this organization and the adoption of these ideas, for the last 70 years, humanity has experienced the longest period of global peace in history, which also coincided with the greatest period of economic growth in history. An international forum was created where nations could resolve their conflicts through cooperation instead of instantly resorting to arms, and something unthinkable was achieved: permanently seating the 5 largest world powers at the same table, each with the same veto power, despite having completely opposing interests. All this did not make the scourge of war disappear, but it has managed so far to prevent any conflict from escalating to global proportions. The result was that we went from having 2 world wars in less than 40 years, which together claimed more than 120 million lives, to having 70 consecutive years of relative peace and global stability under an order that allowed the entire world to integrate commercially, compete, and prosper. Because where commerce enters, bullets do not, said Bastiat. Because commerce guarantees peace, liberty guarantees commerce, and equality before the law guarantees liberty. In the end, what the prophet Isaiah predicted came true, and it can be read in the park across the street. God will judge between the nations and arbitrate for many peoples. They will turn their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation. They will no longer know war. This is what has mostly happened under the tutelage of the United Nations in its first decades. And that's why, from this perspective, we are talking about a remarkable success in the history of nations that cannot be overlooked. However, at some point, as it often happens with most bureaucratic structures that men create, this organization stopped caring for the principles outlined in its founding declaration and began to change. An organization that had been essentially thought of as a shield to protect the realm of men transformed into a leviathan with multiple tentacles that aims to decide not only what each nation state must do, but also how all citizens of the world should live. Thus, we went from an organization that pursued peace to an organization that imposes an ideological agenda on its members on endless issues related to life in society. The United Nations model that has been successful, whose origins can be traced back to the ideas of President Wilson, who spoke of a society of peace without victory, and was founded on the cooperation of nation states, has been abandoned. It has been replaced by a supranational government model of international bureaucrats who intend to impose a certain way of life on the citizens of the world. What is being discussed this week here in New York at the Summit of the Future is nothing more than the deepening of that tragic path that this institution has adopted. The deepening of a model that, in the words of the United Nations Secretary himself, demands defining a new social contract on a global scale, doubling down on the commitments of the 2030 Agenda. I want to be clear about Argentina's stance on the agenda. The 2030 Agenda, although well-intentioned in its goals, is nothing more than a supranational government program of a socialist nature, which seeks to solve the problems of modernity with solutions that undermine the sovereignty of nation-states and violate the right to life, liberty, and property of individuals. It is an agenda that aims to solve poverty, inequality, and discrimination with legislation that only deepens these issues. Because world history shows that the only way to guarantee prosperity is by limiting the power of the ruler, ensuring equality before the law, and defending the right to life, liberty, and property of individuals. It is precisely the adoption of this agenda which caters to privileged interests and the abandonment of the principles outlined in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights that has distorted the role of this institution and set it on the wrong path. Thus, we have seen how an organization born to defend human rights has become one of the main promoters of systematic violation of freedom, for instance, with global quarantines in the year 2020, which should be considered a crime against humanity. In this very House that claims to defend human rights, they have allowed bloody dictatorships like those of Cuba and Venezuela to join the Human Rights Council without the slightest reproach. In this very House that claims to defend women's rights, countries that punish their women for showing skin have been allowed into the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. In this very House, systematic votes have been cast against the State of Israel, which is the only country in the Middle East that upholds liberal democracy, while simultaneously demonstrating a total incapacity to respond to the scourge of terrorism. In the economic sphere, collectivist policies that hinder economic growth, violate property rights, and disrupt the natural economic process have been promoted, even preventing the most underprivileged countries in the world from freely enjoying their own resources to move forward. Regulations and provisions have been pushed precisely by the countries that developed by doing the very same things they now condemn. A toxic relationship has also been promoted between global governance policies and international credit organizations, forcing the most neglected countries to commit resources they don't have to programs they don't need, turning them into perpetual debtors to push the agenda of the global elites. The oversight of the World Economic Forum has not helped either, where ridiculous policies with Malthusian blinders like zero-emission policies, which especially harm poor countries, and policies linked to sexual and reproductive rights are promoted, while the birth rate in Western countries is plummeting, heralding a bleak future for all. Nor has the organization satisfactorily fulfilled its mission to defend the territorial sovereignty of its members, as we Argentines know firsthand in relation to the Falkland Islands. And we have even reached a situation where the Security Council, which is the most important body of this House, has been denatured because the veto of its permanent members has started to be used to defend the particular interests of some. This is where we are today, with an organization powerless to provide solutions to the real global conflicts, such as the abhorrent Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has already cost more than 300,000 lives, leaving a trail of over 1 million injured in the process. An organization that, instead of addressing these conflicts, spends time and effort imposing on poor countries how they should produce, who they should engage with, what they should eat, and what they should believe, as the current Future Pact aims to dictate. This long list of mistakes and contradictions has not come without consequences. It has resulted in the loss of credibility of the United Nations among the citizens of the free world and the distortion of its function. Therefore, I want to issue a warning. We are at the end of a cycle. The collectivism and moral posturing of the UOC agenda have collided with reality, and no longer have credible solutions to offer for the real problems of the world. In fact, they never did. If the 2030 agenda failed, as its own promoters acknowledge, the response should be to ask ourselves if it was a poorly conceived program from the outset, accept reality, and change course. You cannot persist in error by doubling down on an agenda that has failed. The same thing always happens with ideas from the left. They design a model according to what human beings should do, according to them. And when individuals freely act differently, their only solution is to restrict, suppress, and curtail their freedom. We in Argentina have already seen with our own eyes what lies at the end of this path of envy and sad passions, poverty, brutality, anarchy, and a fatal absence of freedom. We still have time to veer away from that direction. I want to be clear about something to avoid any misunderstandings. Argentina, which is currently undergoing a deep process of change, has decided to embrace the ideas of freedom. These ideas say that all citizens are born free and equal before the law, that we have inalienable rights granted by the Creator, among which are the right to life, liberty, and property. These principles guiding the process of change we are carrying out in Argentina are also the principles that will govern our international behavior from now on. We believe in the defense of everyone's life. We believe in the defense of everyone's property. We believe in freedom of expression for all. We believe in freedom of worship for all. We believe in freedom of commerce for all. And we believe in limited governments, all of them. And as in these times, what happens in one country quickly impacts others. We believe that all people should live free from tyranny and oppression, whether it takes the form of political repression, economic slavery, or religious fanaticism. These fundamental ideas should not remain just words. It must be supported by actions diplomatically, economically, and materially through the united strength of all the countries that defend freedom. This doctrine of the new Argentina is nothing more and nothing less than the true essence of the United Nations organization, that is, the cooperation of United Nations in defense of freedom. If the United Nations decides to return to the principles that gave it life and to readapt the role for which it was conceived, count on the unwavering support of Argentina in the fight for freedom. Also know that Argentina will not support any policy that involves the restriction of individual freedoms, commerce, or the violation of the natural rights of individuals. It does not matter who promotes it or how much consensus that institution has. For this reason, we want to officially express our dissent regarding the future pact signed on Sunday. We invite all nations of the free world to join us, not only in dissenting from this pact, but also in creating a new agenda for this noble institution, the agenda of freedom. From this day, know that the Argentine Republic will abandon the historical position of neutrality that has characterized us and will be at the forefront of the fight in defense of freedom, because Passanto Pimertasipos, as Thomas Paine said, those who wish to reap the blessings of freedom must, like men, endure the fatigue of supporting it. May God bless Argentinians and all the citizens of the world, and may the forces of heaven be with us. Long live freedom. Damn it. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Argentine Republic.